Also this morning, a huge turnout in Bellevue over the weekend as people came to be against and for Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. She made an appearance at a fundraising event, drawing both opposition from protesters and supporters as well.
We shall not be
The Muslim advocacy group CAIR hosting the event inside the Meydenbauer Convention Center. At one point, police actually had to block off part of downtown due to the protests happening outside. Now, Brandy is here. We want to talk about the Congresswoman's remarks, but first, for people who aren't familiar, why is this such a controversial topic?
She's been called anti-Semitic, and I'll say that she's been called anti-Semitic by people from her own party as well. And it really has to do with her criticism of Israel, and not just the fact that she's been critical of Israel, but the way in which she's gone about it. She's been accused of using and bringing up sort of old Jewish stereotypes as a way to be critical of policies regarding Israel. For instance, she accused Republicans of being pro-Israel because they want money from Jewish donors. So that's an example of some of the types of remarks or suggestions that she's been criticized for. But some of her supporters who gathered outside the Meydenbauer over the weekend said that the Congresswoman should be able to be critical of Israel, like treatment of Palestine and Palestinians, for instance, without being labeled anti-Semitic.
She is really taking a stand against a lot of U.S. policies around the world that are really just imperialist and very domineering. And she's really exposing things that our government is doing, that the Israeli government is doing with our government support. And just criticizing that is not anti-Semitic.
So as we had said, there were a lot of supporters, but also this is a group here of folks who are there to rail against the Congresswoman from Minnesota. One of the other things that she said that's raised eyebrows in recent months is that Jewish Americans have sort of this divided loyalty between America and Israel, and that is something that has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Just so you know, there were a lot of police officers on hand over the weekend from a lot of different agencies who were there just to sort of keep things in line, because wherever Congresswoman Omar has gone around the country for these types of events, she has been met by protesters, both in support of her and against her. So they were certainly ready for her visit and ready to be there.
Yeah, you broke down some of the controversies here. We want to get back now to the purpose for her visit and the remarks. Congresswoman Omar, here for some kind of fundraising event.
Yeah, it was a fundraising event for CAIR Washington. So that's the Washington chapter of the Council for American Islamic Relations. And so really what she was invited to speak about. And here you have, she is high profile, and particularly for folks clearly in the Muslim community. She was one of 2 women elected in November who became the first female Muslims elected to Congress. So she is a big deal, and certainly for folks who support CAIR and that organization. And she was there to talk about increasing the Muslim influence on politics in the United States, and really pointed to her own candidacy, her own campaign, and ultimately her own election as proof that it is possible.
We are a nation founded on religious liberty, where people seeking opportunity and a better life can find it, regardless of their faith. And by gathering in the home of the most powerful legislature in our country and in the world, we demonstrated that Muslims are a vital part of the American fabric and worthy of representation at the highest levels of government.
So one thing I thought was interesting was that Jay Inslee was there, of course, our governor, but he's running for president as well. Why I thought it was interesting that he attended is, as I had mentioned earlier, you even have Democrats who view Congresswoman Ilhan Omar as being somewhat controversial. In the midst of all of these comments that she had been making that drew criticism that she was being anti-Semitic, the Democrat-controlled House of Representatives voted on and passed a resolution to sort of condemn anti-Semitism and other, like Islamophobia, for instance, but really it was about, and it was after, and it had to do with Ilhan Omar. And so for Inslee to show up at the event and to kind of speak and talk about her being there, it is putting himself out a little bit, because she is such a point of controversy, even among members of her own party.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that, Brandy. All right, we'll check back in the